All right, it is May the 4th, so live long and prosper. So I'm stealing that joke from Al because, sorry, I'm a Star Trek fan. Welcome to the Sunshine State Happy Hour, powered by Florida Beer Blog and the Florida Beer Podcast. This is Dave, your host and author. With me again is my co-host, field producer, and all-around partner in crime when it comes to beer, Steve. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Dave. How you doing?
I can see your Star Wars shirt is on because you love today.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. This is Hopped Up Network Week. This is going to be a week full of shows and hosts that are on the Hopped Up Network. My other show, Lager Layover, is on there, but I don't do a whole lot with it. I have some technical issues. It'll be coming back soon, I promise you. But we've got two hosts from two of the shows that are on that, and they're both excellent shows, so I definitely recommend that you check them out. First, from New York City, we have Al Gattullo from the AG Craft Beer Show. Al, how are you?
Good, very good. How you guys doing?
Excellent. We're doing pretty good. And 1/4 of
did
pints.
You lose me?
Oh, no, we got you. 1/4 of Pints and Provisions is going to be coming on from Illinois. Evan, how are you?
Doing great for a Monday. It's just like any other day of the week, though.
That's funny. Well, actually, so we're going to start off with what beers are you drinking? And Al and Evan, I'm going to go ahead and let you two chat because you sort of have the same sort of beer, sort of.
That's true. I'm actually drinking from Source Brewing down in Colts Neck, New Jersey, their version of All Together. And this came out, I would say, 3 weeks ago. Their version, every week, it seems like another New Jersey brewery is coming out with their version of All Together. I know Twin Elephant has theirs coming out this week. A couple of them are coming out in the next couple of weeks. But they did a really nice version of it. It's a little bit creamier with not a lot of bite to it. A couple of the other versions in New Jersey had a little bit more of a bite to it.
Interesting. And Evan, you have sort of the same thing.
Yeah, I think as a home brewer, it's always fun to see how you can stack up against local breweries. And this is one way not only to support the larger hospitality industry with this beer, but to also kind of make it at home. And since the recipe is pretty simple, I did my own 5-gallon batch. It's mostly 2-row. You can add a little wheat in there, carapils. I don't mean to hijack into this like a homebrew episode, but
no, absolutely. I was actually going to ask as to what the recipe was generally like, and I guess how difficult it is being a hazy. I have not actually had any of this recipe from anybody, so please go right ahead. What's it got?
Well, it like I said, the base malt is 2-row, and then they'll add a few specialty malts like carapils. If you wanted to add a little like naked oats or wheat, you can, which will always add a little bit more haze to it. But most of that haze will come from the hops. And so there was some Cascade, which I said is one of Sam from Other Half's favorite hops to use in these. And I want to say there was probably Citra Mosaic, your usual juicy, fruity, tropical hops. And I did the West Coast version, which used Chico yeast, which is like your typical hazy or ale yeast. And I think that they did say if you wanted to do more of a New England version, they wanted to use London ale yeast. So there were some variations, but for the most part, the versions I've had have all kind of tasted pretty darn good.
Excellent. Now I know, I'm pretty sure, Steve, is anybody down here doing that? Have you heard anything? Because I have not.
I haven't heard anything yet down here about that one. Keep an ear open.
So what are you drinking then?
Funky Buddha Chant IPA.
Gotcha.
Had to make a Publix run today, and it was easy on the shelf.
That works. I am going completely the opposite direction. Of course, mine you can't see through. This, yeah. This. Oh, there you go. Beautiful. So long story short, up in Boynton Beach, there's a place called Copper Point. Brewmaster has been in Coral Springs, which is where Steve and I live for many, many years. This is the chai treated version of his Bee Rabbit Milk Stout. So you just sniff it, and it's, just cinnamon and coriander and just all sorts of amazing notes. It's like some sort of Christmas going on. It's absolutely amazing. So yay. So Al, obviously you are from New York. Evan, you are from Illinois. How are things going on in your neck of the woods? Obviously, Al, we'll start with you because New York sort of famously was sort of a hotbed and hot center for COVID activity
right
for the last couple of weeks.
The nice thing, I still have to go into the studio because I'm considered essential. So the nice thing is there's no traffic, which is great. The bad news is that there are a lot of brewers who have just had to either modify their business or shut down. A lot of them are doing home deliveries, especially within Manhattan and Brooklyn, Staten Island as well. A couple of the outer boroughs as well are doing a lot of these, deliveries when they can. New Jersey, where I live, they seem to have adapted to it a lot quicker than New York did. A number of them kind of changed their profile. One of the bigger breweries in New Jersey, Bolero Snort, just opened their facility in Carlstadt back in January, and they weren't really relying on taproom sales. Most of their business was in cans and kegs. So when they lost their bar business, essentially, they just shifted to all canning, and they had the room to do it, and they have been doing very well. They're releasing 1 or 2 beers a week. They seem to be moving very quickly. A lot of sellouts. The guys that I work with at Source Brewing, they're sponsoring portions of my show now. We're doing a home brewing contest with them where we're going to take a prospective home brewer and upscale their beer. They've got to get it in by the application in by May, the end of May. Their beer has to be in by July 4th, and we're going to do a big thing in August. The grand prize winner, myself and 3 of the guys at Source are going to taste their beers. We pick a winner, we brew their beer, and they get a whole bunch of stuff because in Jersey you can't actually profit off of the beer. So they're going to get gift cards and swag and all kinds of stuff, but their beer is going to be elevated to professional level, which is really cool.
Interesting. Yeah, I heard on the recent episode of your show, at least half of the breweries in New York City itself have basically stopped operation.
Right. That's correct. And it's tough. It's a tough business. One of my buddies at Torch and Crown, they're going to be I think only the second open yet. And they've had to shift to an old business model of delivering the beer or having people come to them. And it is very difficult. He said if we go another 45 days of this, he's probably going to be out of business. That's not good. And they haven't even opened, and that's not good.
That's amazing.
So, and again, obviously, real estate being what it is in Manhattan and in Brooklyn and in a lot of these places, their margins are very slim. If you've cut out half of their business of taproom sales, and now you're cutting out another portion with bar sales, and now you only have 25% to work with, and an enormous mortgage and rent and all kinds of other stuff, I would not be surprised to see more than 40 to 50% of brewers' business. And there's over 400 now. I could very easily see that being cut in half to 200.
That's a shame to hear. In what you mentioned, obviously rent is pretty difficult. Being in the center of Illinois, Evan, I don't think the people that are around you are too terribly difficult, but I know that you also speak to breweries from around the nation. What are the kinds of things that you're seeing either at home or from any of the people that you've been speaking to online?
Locally, you'll definitely see that there's a lot. It just hasn't blown up to a degree like you're probably seeing in New York. And I'm a healthcare provider as my main profession. And so although we've kind of had to shut down and slow down business in our office, we just haven't seen the devastation that a place like New York and other big cities have. Now, sure, up in Chicago, it's a little different story, but down here, it's a little bit safer. Although even though things have shut down, you've seen a couple of the local places have crowlering ability, have moved to bottles and things. And so they do a lot of curbside service, which of course isn't going to make up for all the lost revenue and, dumping kegs and such, but, at least keeps them working for the time being. And hopefully we'll see a little bit of exit out of this before some areas. And so we can get back to some sense of normalcy. But I know the brewer, the local place that I love to go to, and, they've had to scale down quite a bit. And They're doing okay. They make good beer, but what you've heard from some of these brewers, like I talked to Neil Fisher the other week, and they he runs probably one of more of the well-known breweries out in Greeley, Colorado, called WeldWorks. And we had planned on going to the WeldWorks Invitational, which got pushed back to the fall. You saw that their anniversary party got kind of shut down. So basically what happened is, like, you could buy their stuff online, even me here in Illinois, and as long as you knew somebody in the area, they could ship it to you. So a lot of these breweries have found ways to then start shipping stuff or getting it to people. And I think hand sanitizer is like one of those popular things that kind of comes out. Some of these breweries are finding very creative ways. I mean, WeldWorks, again, they've been putting out online content like homebrew expos with one of the brewers at the brewery, and then they do like a cellaring workshop online. And so they've found these interesting ways of keeping online content available to people so they can still feel part of the brewery and part of that experience.
Interesting. With the breweries that are there, Al, you're going to understand where I'm going with this question once you hear it, but I'm going to let Evan go first. Are there any charities or organizations or movements that have sort of cropped up in that area to help out the brewers that haven't been able to keep their entire staffs on, to help out the taproom staff or the brewers that had to get furloughed and so on?
I think locally, since we only have really 2 to 3 breweries, there really isn't like a big consensus or movement. I think that, some of the people that help out, like at the tap room, have just kind of done it on a voluntary basis, and some of which just do it as kind of a hobby or a second job anyway. I wish I could say I knew a little bit more about Chicago, because I know that Chicago's just a superb place to go to for beer and breweries up there. I'm not as familiar with any specific things that they've done, but again, you've seen this transition to getting things available. I mean, we started to get stuff from down here in Peoria through one of the local kind of distributors that opened up a shop down here. We're starting to see this stuff trickle down from Chicago, which is kind of fun, because otherwise we would have had to go to Chicago to get it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I just got an order from a place in West Palm yesterday who shipped a lot of things from much farther north, things that you wouldn't necessarily get down here, and they're trying to just survive. So these are like $5 crowlers, which you just can't beat. Yeah, absolutely. Al, I know that you just had them on your show, and they're actually going to be on this show on Wednesday, but why don't you chat a little bit about Brewery Strong, because I'd like to get a little idea for what that is.
So on the program last night, I had Alexis Deegan, who is one of the board members for Brewery Strong, but she's also the executive director of the New Jersey Brewers Association. And this whole thing came about, Rob Callahan, who runs Tuckahoe Brewing down in South Jersey. They were kind of batting it around with the guys from South Jersey beer scene, John Cruchot and the guys. And he wanted to do something to help people, sort of in the way that All Together is trying to help people in the hospitality industry. And he wasn't really sure how he wanted to go about it, and he started this hashtag Brewery Strong, and it just kind of developed into this whole brainstorm of, hey, let's do something here to help people in and around New Jersey. And so one of the breweries, I mean, you're going to find this out when you talk to them later in the week, Icarus Brewing did their version of All Together a couple of weeks ago. They donated $6,000 already to Brewery Strong, which they're going to use to disperse to folks in the bar industry, folks who work in the hospitality industry. Maybe there's a brewery that had to lay off some of their employees. So they're going to do what they can to move that money around to help people where they can. They've got glasses, they got T-shirts. I bought a T-shirt already to help them out. And I'm interviewing next week on the program a little bit more about Strong and about his brewery, Tuckahoe, and what they're doing. South Jersey and North Jersey, kind of it's almost like 2 different countries, the way things work out. And so a lot of the breweries in South Jersey are in very isolated areas where they're not really in town centers, whereas in North Jersey, a number of the breweries are in places where they're in the center of town. So it's a little bit different. But all of these guys, this is the great thing that I love about the brewery business. All of them have tried to help one another out with whatever it is. Hey, you need cans, you need hops, you need something. And so when things like this happen, it's great to see everybody kind of come together and help as one big family. Even though they're all competing for that same dollar, they're all trying to help one another out, which is great.
Yeah, there's been a number of good partnerships and a lot of conversations down here as well. And it's kind of funny what you say about Jersey. My wife is from, I think, Wanacue. So she's
Okay, up north.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
right across the bridge.
Yep.
This would actually be an interesting question for all three of you because I'm sort of getting different responses for this, but obviously business is down for everybody. My question is more about innovation and new recipes. Are you finding that a lot of the breweries that you're talking to are constantly pushing out new recipes even now, maybe even more so now, just to make people interested and come in? Or are you seeing people kind of double down on their standards because, kind of like what Steve just did, he went to the grocery store and the standards are what he can find, so that's what he went for? So, Steve, I'll make you go first. Al, you're up.
No, go ahead. No, Steve, please, you go first.
I'm seeing a lot of the smaller breweries down here that are definitely pushing the envelope for what they're doing. Bang and Banjo has a new beer released every week, it seems now, with some type of gimmick going on with their beer and cookie pairings they were doing. And they're actually doing 8-ounce cans now for flight sales. And like, they're really pushing the online sales market. And they're doing, drive up to the brewery, pick up your beer and keep going. Or you got, what's it called? Gulfstream Brewing over there in Fort Lauderdale doing the pizzas with their brewery. So they're selling completely contained, ready to bake frozen pizzas. Just throw it in your oven when you get home and you got pizza. And then also they're really good beer. I got beer from them so fresh it didn't have labels on it yet.
Yeah, I remember that when I had to figure out what it was based on the printing on the bottom.
Yep.
Al, what were you going to say?
So in New Jersey, and I can speak more to New Jersey than I can to New York, but in New Jersey, what some of the brewers are doing, like Source Brewing, at least 1 or 2 beers a week they're coming out with. And what's cool about them is they release the beer Friday morning at 9:00, and they have a much smaller facility. They're not as big as some of the others, but they release their beer at 9 a.m. By 9:15, it's sold out. And they have a week pickup window when you can go anytime. You show your QR code, they scan it within 2 minutes. You have your beer. It's on a big barrel, and you walk away. Very non-contact pickup. You have other breweries like Twin Elephant. They're over in Chatham, New Jersey. They have, for my buck, they have probably the best system. You pull up in the driveway, you call the brewery, you give them your number. Guy comes out within a minute or two, puts it right in the car. You don't have to touch anything, and you drive off. So I've seen a lot of the breweries so far coming out with a lot of their standards and some new stuff. I know a lot of guys are doing Pilsners and lagers now, which you wouldn't have normally seen from some of these breweries when they were just making the hazy, juicy IPA over and over again. But now that they have longer times to let things sit in the tanks, they're doing that because they know that, okay, in 4 weeks I'm going to have this, and right now I can push this out in 2 weeks. So it's a little different. Then there are some breweries. We have a brewery down the street here. I'm in Clark, New Jersey. Next town over from me in Rahway, great brewery called Wet Ticket Brewing. They're basically just trying to clear out as much as they can, and they're putting new stuff in the tanks, but they're limited because they have three guys working there. So it's, it all depends on how many people you have.
Nice. Evan, what have you heard, and do you have a whole lot of curbside pickup?
Yeah, we have, as I mentioned, and Peoria is a community that's not super big. We've got one very good kind of nano brewery, I'll say, that does a great job. And he's always been one to push envelope. He loves Norwegian ales, Vossels, that he'll use like juniper and all kinds of sage and rosemary. And he hasn't been putting out as much of those because he has a pretty extensive and well represented portfolio when he puts out his list. He's got like usually a pale lager. He'll put out a hazy IPA, a stout, but turns out that one of the most popular beers that people come in for is their Dunkel. And he's been making more of the Dunkel because people love it. They come in asking for it. So he kind of doubled down on the Dunkel during this pandemic. And of course, the hazy IPA he put out was called the Lockdown. So he put out more of that. And I think that he's been getting more creative because, being a nano brewery, he doesn't have as much access to every specialty grain hop on the market. And he probably is starting to dig into his own cellar in terms of ingredients and see what he can make. And so you've seen him put out a Pilsner now that he has bottled. You've seen him put out the Dunkel now in bottles. And so that's been a pretty popular offering. But he's also, like he said, food. I think he's been putting out like frozen pizzas, which I'm sure that they just had in their refrigerator, saying like, hey, you want a pizza and a beer? Great. We can put a couple and we'll give you a half price pizza. So it's been fun to see them innovate. The other local place in town is kind of part of a, like a restaurant and microbrewery kind of situation. And they just keep kind of putting out their standards. They do a great coffee stout, which they've still been able to get the coffee from the local roaster, and they do a cold brew. So they've been staying in business and putting that stuff out. So I think it's all about, them at least locally utilizing what they have and then speaking to the crowd as to what they want.
Excellent. That juniper place sounds really kind of fantastic.
Some people kind of like, I don't know about like a rosemary and sage saison, but he is kind of all in on at least having something like that on his menu.
That's amazing. So let's do a little shameless self-promotion, which is what every podcaster does when they get on somebody else's podcast. With Pints and Provisions, it's really, you kind of run the full gastronomic range with that podcast and everything. How'd that sort of get started, and what can you really sort of elevator pitch to people about listening to the show?
Mostly it's been the four guys that we kind of initially started with about a couple years ago. Is that, myself and Ryan have been big on the beer side. Mark, who is we call him the provisions guy. He's like the barbecue meat extraordinaire, but he's also kind of the whiskey and bourbon guru. So actually our very first episode, which I think is always a must listen, was a bourbon. It was a bourbon episode. And you got a guy, and he's a big guy, and he's pouring like 3-finger pours of like big bourbons. And it got rather interesting towards the end. But like I would say, the pilot isn't always the best, but I think our pilot has always been kind of fun to listen to.
That's amazing. You're very lucky. I don't want anybody to listen to my first 10 shows.
Well, and then there was like this weird dip in the record. We kind of figured out the recording things, but from there on, it was always like trying to incorporate all the things we love. We've been to a couple local coffee places because we all really love coffee, and we have some amazing local roasters here in Peoria. And so it's been, what are these like obsessions and crafts that you all like? Well, it's not just beer. It's also wine. It's also whiskey. It's also food. It's also coffee. And we even did like a charcuterie episode where we talked about, how best to put a charcuterie board together. And we have a guy that contributes once in a while. He's originally from Tennessee, and he is like a foodie to the nines. Like he is very meticulous on thinking about his food and pairings. And so we had him on, and it's just been fun because I always say, like, my favorite times to have a beer are when I'm cooking. But it's also like having a pint out, but it's just like wine with cooking and beer with cooking. I love pairing things and thinking about that. So that's where the whole Pints and Provisions came through.
Nice. And Al, you promised us a story about the creation of your podcast, or your show.
Yeah. So I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination. And the show kind of started about 5 years ago, even though we've only been on the air now. This is our fourth year that I'm on the air with the show. But 5 years ago, in August of 2015, I'm at my local community pool, and my neighbor calls and he says, "What are you doing? I just got laid off." And I said, "Oh, come down. We're at the pool." He shows up at the pool. I'm just about to jump in the water. I got all my stuff on. I'm ready to go in. My son's in the pool. And what happens? Some kid takes a dump in the pool. So now it's 90 degrees. Nobody can go in the pool. We got to go home. So I said to him, "Look, why don't you come over? I just got some new beers from Coronado Brewing." He said, "All right, great." So we start drinking a couple of Coronados in the backyard. They had just started distributing in New Jersey. I take a picture of the beer. I tweet it out. Within 5 minutes, somebody from Coronado Brewing is now following me, and they send me a little note and says, "Hey, thanks for giving us some East Coast love. I'm originally from New York. Would love to send you some stuff." So I'm thinking, okay, well, here's my address, whatever. I'm thinking a hat, a T-shirt. 4 days later, an enormous box shows up with 6 packs of beer, bomber bottles, T-shirts, hats. I'm like, oh, my God, what is it? So my friend says to me, he says, you should do a beer show. So I blow him off. I say, yeah, okay, whatever. I start doing a couple of YouTube videos. Somebody from my office, because I work in radio, sees the videos, says it's a great idea, we should do it. And then my boss comes to me a couple of months later in December at our Christmas party, and he says, Al, I love the idea. We have to do a beer show. I said, Jerry, you're drunk. Talk to me on Monday. If you still want to do it, let's do it. So that Monday he came to me sober, and he said, if you can sell it, it's yours. 2 months later, the beer show started, and we haven't looked back since.
That's funny. It sort of reminds me as to what happened with Cecily Strong from Saturday Night Live. Did you all see that?
Yes. That's why I said, thank that kid for taking the dump in the pool. If he hadn't taken a dump, the show wouldn't be on. So there you go.
Hysterical. For those of you that don't know, Cecily Strong, one of the characters that she plays on Saturday Night Live on occasion is Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Right.
It is. She was on a sketch that was cut, but it was broadcast online of her being Governor Weimer, but drinking, I think, a PBR or something.
Yeah.
And Gretchen Weimer then sent her the most glorious box from Bell's Brewery.
That's right.
It's pretty cool.
I mean, it's like at least the 4 6-packs, a couple tin tacks, shirts, stickers. It's disgusting, which is amazing. I do want to say this really briefly because I know that she's watching, but Al, the whole thing about being on the media and everything and having somebody reach out to you. The first brewery that reached out to me when I was doing the blog before I even started the podcast was Three Daughters. And tomorrow morning, their co-owner, Lee Harding, is actually going to be on live with, it's not Regis and Kathy Lee anymore. It's Ryan and Kelly, or Kelly and Ryan.
Ryan and Kelly. Ryan and Kelly, who destroyed radio, but okay. Let him do TV show too. Sorry, I'm not bitter at all. Trust me.
No, he's good on American Idol, but personally, I like my local people. Yeah, so, but no, she's going to be on live with Ryan and Kelly because they, just like you were mentioning, Evan, they've been doing the hand sanitizer. They've been doing the roll up. They've been doing some really good. I think they've been basically doing BOGO 6-packs for a long time. We actually got a nice little care package, and I quickly introduced Steve to some of his favorite IPAs.
Yeah.
Florida
Orange is amazing.
You know, the funny thing about Coronado Brewing, I became such good friends with the people at the brewery. My wife and I, a couple of years ago, we took a trip out to Southern California during Christmas time, and it was sort of a half beer trip, half kind of, vacation. And Coronado and Stone, I have pretty good relationships with Stone Brewing, and both of them did these amazing things for us. Like Coronado gave us a full private tour, showed us everything. We did an interview with them. We could drink whatever we wanted in the brewery. They gave us a ton of T-shirts and stuff to take home. And then the same day, we drove to Escondido to Stone, a full tour. They gave us dinner in the beer gardens, and they just kept bringing us beer. They're like, "Oh, you have to try this one, and you have to try this one." And my wife looked at me and said, "Are we going to make it back to the hotel?" I said, "We'll get there at some point. We'll get there. Don't worry." But they just, beer after beer after beer. It's if you've never been to Southern California, you've never been to San Diego.
That's so good.
Yeah,
it is amazing. It is amazing. We did one day where we started at Bagby Beer in Oceanside, California, and worked our way all the way back to Coronado Island. And I think it took us, we started at 11 in the morning. I think we got back to Coronado about 10 o'clock at night. Amazing.
I think, Al, that just speaks to how awesome it is to be involved in the beer community. And I know, like, people can kind of look at this as like a just kind of a silly hobby and a silly passion, but my co-host Ryan and I have been obsessed with Live Oak Brewing down in Austin, Texas. They make an amazing an amazing Pilsner, and
they are right next to the airport, which is
right
beautiful.
next. There's no excuse not to go there if you visit Austin. And like, we'd posted a few pictures of cans and stuff that we've had of theirs because my best friend lives down there. He can send it. They're in grocery stores, so he can send it to me anytime. And all of a sudden, they're
I'm writing the name down. Live Oak.
Brewing. Everything is yellow and brown, and make sure your friend sends some stuff to me because I miss them.
Yeah, best hef and pills you'll probably ever have.
Evan, can I just stop you for a second?
Yeah.
I find not a lot of people are making Hefeweizens these days.
Oh,
it
no.
seems to me like, lagers and pilsners seem to be making a comeback, right? Because everybody's kind of IPA'd out. But I really find my local guy down the street here at Wet Ticket makes a fantastic Hefeweizen. But I find a lot of brewers don't make a really good Hefeweizen anymore. I wonder why that is.
Probably because it's harder to make.
Right. You can't hide the stakes in it as much.
It's
And
true.
it's not the cool beer to make.
Right.
Right.
I mean, take a look at the brown ale. It's not the cool beer to make, and so nobody makes it.
And another thing is too, like, think about Texas. It's hot all year round almost.
Mhm.
What do you want to sit out on the back patio? Do you want to drink a bunch of like 10% stouts and 8.5% double dry hopped IPAs?
Right.
No, you want to have a Pilsner, a lager,
Right.
a Helles, and that's why. And yeah, a Hef is not always the most sexy style in the world to make and to have. But like, again, my local brewery, the best thing on their menu is the Dunkel. Like,
Right.
who pines for a Dunkel? Oh my God, it is amazing. But anyway, like Live Oak sends us this big box out of nowhere, and I mean, just full of and some one-offs and stuff that they did. They wanted to can, and it was really fun talking to them on an episode we did a couple times ago too, Mike down there, because they're going through the same stuff. They've had to kind of retool their business plan and figure out how best to serve people, because in Texas, it's all about drinking outside.
Right.
And
talk about an outdoor beer garden. Live Oak is huge.
I think they have a frisbee golf course on there.
Yeah,
It's like a couple frisbee holes or whatever, frisbee golf holes.
So that actually brings me to an interesting question, and I've had this conversation with many a brewer, because obviously they can take a look at our content, the product that we've been putting out for years for pretty much all of our cases, and understand who we are and why we're doing it. Do you think that there are a lot of brewers that just get inundated with, and I'm going to use this term because I absolutely hate it, influencers that are in it just to get the free stuff? And do you think that makes your job as alternative beer media more difficult?
That's a great question. There are times that I'll ask for things from certain brewers. Hey, if this is coming out, could I get some? But a lot of times they're sending the stuff to me because they want me to drink it and review it. And listen, I'm no home brewer. I'm no expert. My thing is, I see it, I drink it. If I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. That's why I do a segment called Suds and Duds. If I don't like it, it's a dud. If I like it, it's a studs. That's it. Nice. I try to keep it simple because I don't know all of the technical stuff. And to be quite honest with you, I don't want to know, because then it's like you don't want to know how the sausage is made, right? So for me, and I don't have the patience to be a brewer. My cousin brews beer. He's 20-something years younger than me, and he's phenomenal at it. Me, I would screw things up. I'd be screaming and carrying on and whatever. I do think that to your point about that influencing thing, because I've talked to a lot of brewers about doing some advertising and stuff, and a lot of times they're like, I don't need to advertise on the radio. I have word of mouth and whatever. The guys from Source who are buying time on my show, they came to me 2 months ago before all of this pandemic stuff started and said, look, we love what you're doing, and thanks for promoting us, but we want to buy advertising on your show. And part of me was like, hey, great. And then another part of me was like, well, now if you're buying advertising, do I have to be skewed towards you because you're buying advertising? That's the difficult balance that you have to have. But I think if people know you and people respect the stuff that you're doing, you can be credible about their beer along with everybody else's beer. People get on me all the time because I talk about big beer, or I interview, like we had the head of Elysian Brewing a couple of months ago, because they did a beer with Rolling Stone magazine, and they debuted at the Super Bowl. And I know one of the guys from AB InBev, and he called me and he said, we want to come in the studio. We want to bring you beer. Okay, that's fine. And some people will knock me, but hey, they're brewing beer just like everybody else. The reason why those guys sold out, if you want to call it, sometimes it's an economic decision. Blue Point Brewing was one of the first interviews on my show, and I was a big fan of Blue Point for a long time. And I spoke with the owner at his office in Long Island, first show that I ever did. And he said to me, plain and simple, he said, I sold out to AB InBev because I needed to take loans out to build out my business. He had kind of an indoor-outdoor operation where they were brewing beer in one spot. They had to bring it outside to bring it to the other part of the brewery, put it on trucks, and get it moving. He said, if I had taken a loan out and my business went south, now I have to lay off employees. I have to, all of these things, that's going to cost me money. He said, they give me the security to keep my business running and keep these guys employed. I get exactly where he was coming from, even though people sell out and this and that and whatever. But at the end of the day, you're in it to make a profit, right? I mean, anybody that tells you they're not in it to make a profit, they're lying to you.
I just don't feel like I'm much of an influencer. My friends and I did this because as a hobby to start off with, and we feel like as long as we keep it a hobby and as long as we're not, and granted, we've reached out to friends and such to send us beer, but it's never been something where we've ever asked for beer. We've always been able to kind of procure stuff because we know people from all over the place and they'll send us stuff. But we just like it because we like the stuff. We like the beer. We like the coffee. We like the local meat markets. We like some local places. Like, for instance, one of the places that's been shut down in our town was run by a group of guys who opened up the kind of tap room that is a pour your own. So they got 16 taps. You kind of get one of those key fob cards and you just kind of go, and they can procure some of the best, like, small kegs and stuff, because they're these guys that decided to go to, if you guys have ever heard of Scratch Brewing, I mean, they're like these weird forager, like, they'll make it with dirt and leaves if they need to, like, on their property in Southern Illinois. And they'll go down there, which is 4 hours from here, and just say, hey, what are you guys willing to get? Like, they're in for making personal relationships. So we started asking them, like, hey, do you mind if we record at your tap room, like your location? They're like, no, go ahead. And from there on forward, it just kind of became a home base because they always thanked us for coming and promoting them. And we never asked for anything other than just time and space. So it was always fun to go down there because they're just good guys and they're entrepreneurs and we love supporting them. And so it was more of just kind of procuring and promoting the local scene rather than it was anything beyond that. And Ryan and I specifically have always been big on, like, we travel once in a while for our jobs. And so we've always been like, if we go to San Diego, for instance, like you said, Al, you want to hit up every place you can, or if we go to Austin, every place you can. And so it's always been a destination. So we've kind of found places that we really like, and we'll grab beers or we'll have friends send us beers. And it's always just about promoting the stuff we like. It's never been about being an influencer and worrying about how many likes or how many followers or how many. It's just because we like it. We don't want to be beholden to anybody to say, please promote our stuff. Now, if someone said, hey, we're really interested and we really like them because they're good people, I mean, we wouldn't maybe turn it down, but it's just, I feel like if it stops being a hobby, then it's not fun.
Right.
No, that makes perfect sense. So I will leave you with the last question that I've been asking everybody. And it's interesting to hear the responses, but obviously breweries have had to do some different things and make some changes to survive our current economic crisis. Once everything is back to normal, once we are done with this, once Dr. Fauci has his vaccine and everything is okay, yada, yada, so on and so forth, what change have you seen breweries make that you think should be part of brewery culture from here on out and everybody should be doing just as a normal part of operation?
Well, in the case of New Jersey, I think that they should continue because I'll be fair. I think even if the state gets back to normal in, let's say, the next 60 days, I think they're going to obviously limit the amount of people that are in restaurants and bars. They're going to limit the amount of people that are in tap rooms. So if your tap room holds 50 people, now you're going to only have 25 in it, right? So you have to figure out a way to make business work. In New Jersey, they started selling and doing delivering, and then all of a sudden, somebody from the New Jersey ABC said, oh, wait a minute, they're not supposed to do that. They have to do this, or somebody got in the governor's ear or whatever. I have a feeling I know who it is, but the Restaurant Commission, I think, wasn't happy about what the brewers were doing. They kind of butt heads with one another because breweries in New Jersey, unless you're a limited brew pub, you can't sell food. So I think what needs to stay, at least for now, and I think this is something that needs to be legislated in New Jersey, is to allow the breweries to continue to do curbside pickup or delivery services. I think if they continue to do that, if you're going to limit the amount of people in your tap room, that will keep those breweries going. If you just flip a switch and say, okay, we're back to normal, but you can only have half of the people in your tap room. There are about 110 breweries in New Jersey. I could guarantee you 60 of them will not survive. It'll just be devastation. And you're talking about a segment of New Jersey that brings in a considerable tax dollar. And the state is going to be looking for revenue. Well, here's your revenue. You have to find a way to make it work. So I think if you do that, if you allow them to continue takeout and you allow them to continue delivery services, even if it's temporary, even if it's for a year or 2 years, I think that will help New Jersey brewers.
Yeah, I'll probably dovetail a lot on that answer, because I think it'll also be kind of hard to take those rules away now that you've kind of allowed curbside pickup and to-go service. It might be really tough. And I think you're going to see a little disintegration of the 3-tier system in a way. And that may be crummy for the distributors because they're businesses too, but they're mostly distributing for big beer and big entities. And that's okay, because if you like that stuff and that's what you want, I don't have any problem with it. But I think what you're going to see is a little bit of a disintegration of how the big beer reacts to the 3-tier system, because you're going to be able to see small breweries. And I hope that I can just go online and order, if available, Pliny the Elder, and it's shipped to my house. And I think that would be a great addition, because not only does that allow people to say oh my gosh, I've never been able to have Pliny the Elder. It's so good. I'd love to have it. Well, then they can just get online and order it if it's available. Right. So I think that could be a great addition to getting people what they want to try in a different way. But again, I think it's going to be hard to change some of these rules that have now come into place where you can just pull up to, I'd love to be able to order an old fashioned to go, but I think I'll just handle crowlers right now.
You should come down to where we are. We've got places that are making half gallons of Mai Tais available.
We have that in a couple places in New Jersey. They will give you a mojito kit ready to go. You just pour the stuff in, or a sangria kit, which is actually smart for them because the stuff is sitting there. So why not try to market it in some way possible to make some type of profit off of it? I don't blame them.
Yeah, exactly. But hopefully we'll be done with this soon, but hopefully we'll see some changes for the better. So
for the better.
Al, Evan, thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. If you want more information on us, we are available at floridabeerblog.com, Florida Beer Podcast, along with the AG Craft Beer Podcast and Pints and Provisions, can be found anywhere that fine podcasts are downloaded. Tomorrow, The Wart will be on the show, once again, 5 p.m. right here. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.